When I first met John, everything felt so perfect. He was kind, funny, and always knew how to make me feel special. We started dating almost a year ago, and at first, things were amazing. I had been in relationships before that left me feeling insecure, but John seemed different. He was patient with me, always reassuring me whenever I needed it. I knew from the beginning that he was into the furry community. He never tried to hide it, and honestly, I didn't see any problem with it. To me, it was just an interest, a hobby, something harmless. It wasn't something I was particularly into, but I respected that it was a part of his life. If it made him happy, who was I to judge? At first, everything felt normal. We would talk for hours about everything and anything. He made me feel safe. And for the first time in a long time, I started believing that maybe this relationship wouldn't be like the ones before. That maybe I wouldn't have to deal with the same insecurities that had haunted me in the past. But over time, I started noticing things that made me feel uneasy. It wasn't about real people this time. It wasn't another girl from his class or someone he met at a party. It was different, something I didn't even know how to process at first. John consumed a lot of furry content, and not just casual art or memes. I started realizing that a lot of it was sexual. At first, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it wasn't a big deal. After all, it wasn't real, right? It wasn't like he was looking at real people. But the more I saw, the more I felt this uncomfortable weight inside me. I didn't know how to talk to him about it. Would I sound crazy? Would he think I was overreacting? So I kept it to myself, hoping that maybe it wouldn't bother me so much over time. But it did. And the more I tried to push it away, the harder it became to ignore. At first, I convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't like he was hiding it. John openly followed furry artists and pages, and he never seemed ashamed of it. But as time passed, I started noticing patterns that made me uncomfortable. His social media feeds were filled with highly sexualized furry content. It wasn't just casual fan art or simple character designs. It was explicit. Every time I scrolled through his Instagram near him, I'd catch glimpses of suggestive drawings. Some were just flirtatious, but others were undeniably pornographic. I tried to rationalize it. He wasn't looking at real people. He wasn't cheating. This was just a part of his interests, right? But no matter how much I told myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started paying more attention, and the more I did, the worse I felt. It wasn't just random posts here and there. John actively sought out this kind of content. His Explore page was flooded with it, and he followed so many accounts that exclusively posted this material. I began to wonder, if it was all so harmless, why did it make me feel this way? It took me months to admit to myself that I wasn't okay with it. I felt like I was battling my own mind, trying to figure out if I was just being irrational. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe my insecurities were making me see things that weren't really there. But I knew how I felt. And no matter how much I tried to suppress it, I couldn't deny that this was making me uncomfortable. The problem was, I had no idea how to tell him without sounding crazy. After months of overthinking, I finally gathered the courage to talk to John about it. I was terrified. I didn't want to come off as controlling or insecure, but I also couldn't keep pretending it didn't bother me. One evening, while we were lying in bed texting, I decided to bring it up. My heart was racing as I typed out the words, "Hey, can we talk about something? It's kind of been on my mind for a while." He responded almost instantly, concerned. "Of course, what's wrong?" I hesitated before sending the next message. I didn't want to make it a big deal, but there was no way to sugarcoat it. "I've noticed that you look at a lot of, explicit, furry stuff, and I don't know. It just makes me feel weird. I'm not saying you can't, but I guess I just wanted to tell you how I feel about it." I stared at the screen, waiting for his response. My stomach twisted in knots. Would he get mad? Would he think I was being ridiculous? But to my surprise, he didn't. "Oh, I didn't know it made you feel that way. I'm really sorry, babe. I never meant to make you uncomfortable. I'll stop. Just like that. No argument, no defensiveness, just immediate understanding. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had spent months dreading this conversation, expecting the worst, only for him to take it so well. True to his word, he deleted everything. He even showed me his phone to prove it. That night, I went to sleep feeling lighter than I had in months. It felt like a victory, not just because he stopped, but because I had finally spoken up for myself. For a while, I thought the problem was solved, but I had no idea that this was only the beginning. For a while, everything seemed fine. John had deleted the explicit furry content, and I felt like I could finally relax. I had opened up about something deeply uncomfortable for me, and he had listened. That should have been the end of it. But then, little by little, I started noticing something else. It began when I was casually scrolling through Instagram next to him. As I glanced at his screen, I noticed him liking a post. One of a woman wearing revealing lingerie, posing suggestively. But she wasn't just any woman. She was wearing a furry mask. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just one post, right? But as I paid more attention, I realized it wasn't a one-time thing. He followed dozens of these accounts, women in provocative outfits, often wearing just a mask or ears to fit the furry aesthetic. And suddenly, the relief I had felt disappeared completely. This time, it hurt even more. Because unlike the animated characters he had stopped looking at, these were real women. And I couldn't stop myself from comparing. I tried to brush it off, but the more I saw, the worse it got. These women had perfect bodies, posed in ways I never would, exuding confidence I didn't have. I felt replaceable, like I wasn't enough. And the worst part? I didn't know if I even had the right to feel this way. Still, I knew I couldn't ignore it forever, so I brought it up. John, can I ask you something? Why do you follow so many of those girls on Instagram? He looked confused, as if the thought had never even crossed his mind. Huh? What girls? I hesitated before clarifying. The ones with the masks, the ones in lingerie. His response was immediate. Oh, I don't know. I just think their outfits are cool. It's not like I'm attracted to them or anything. I didn't know what to say. To me, it didn't feel that different from watching regular porn. But he didn't see it that way. And that scared me. Because this time, I wasn't sure if he would stop. Even after our conversation, nothing really changed. John didn't unfollow those accounts right away, and every time I brought it up, he brushed it off. It's just Instagram, he'd say. It's not like I even talk to them. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't about whether he had contact with these women. It was about how it made me feel. Every time I saw him scrolling through those posts, something inside me twisted. My mind would start racing with thoughts I couldn't control. Why did he need to see these women dressed like that? Wasn't I enough? I hated how insecure I was becoming. I hated how much time I spent overanalyzing something that, to him, was completely harmless. But was it really harmless? Because to me, it felt like a constant reminder that I wasn't what he wanted. Eventually, I brought it up again. This time, I tried to stay as calm as possible. I know you don't think it's a big deal, but it's really starting to bother me. I feel like I'm constantly comparing myself to these women, and it's messing with my self-esteem. John sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what you want me to do. It's not like I have feelings for them. I don't even think about it that deeply. I swallowed hard. I don't understand why you need to see that. If it's nothing, then why is it so hard to stop? He didn't have an answer. But over the next few weeks, I noticed he started unfollowing some of them. Not all, but enough for me to see that he was at least trying. And yet, even after that, the problem wasn't gone. Because the one thing that never changed was his Instagram Explore page. And that was something I couldn't ignore. I tried to let it go. I really did. John had made an effort, at least in his own way. He unfollowed some of the accounts, and I told myself that should be enough. But every time I opened Instagram near him, I would catch glimpses of his Explore page, and my stomach would sink. It was everywhere. Dozens of posts featuring hypersexualized furry characters, art, animations, edits, sometimes subtle, sometimes blatantly pornographic. It wasn't just a few scattered images. It was a flood. Like this was the only thing the algorithm thought he cared about. I tried to rationalize it. He wasn't actively searching for these posts, right? It was just what Instagram was showing him. But then I'd remind myself, that's how the algorithm works. It shows you more of what you engage with the most, and clearly, he was engaging with a lot of this content. The worst part was how trapped I felt. I wanted to bring it up, but every time I imagined the conversation, I froze. How could I possibly explain this without sounding completely insane? Hey, I know we already talked about this, but I don't like how much of your feed is full of this stuff. It sounded ridiculous, even in my own head. They weren't real people. They weren't even the half-masked Instagram models I had already struggled with. They were just drawings, fictional. And yet, the feelings they stirred in me were painfully real. I kept replaying our past conversations. Every time I had mentioned my jealousy over this type of content, John reacted badly. Not in an aggressive way, but in a dismissive one. Like I was making a big deal out of nothing. And maybe I was. Maybe I was just being insecure. Maybe I was trying to control something that didn't actually matter. But if that were true, then why did it feel like I was slowly losing my mind? I knew I couldn't keep this to myself forever. The more I ignored it, the worse it got. It was like a weight pressing down on me, making every interaction feel strained. I started overthinking every moment we spent together, wondering if he noticed how distant I had become. So I tried again. One evening, while we were on a call, I decided to bring it up as casually as I could. Hey, can I ask you something? I don't want to start a fight or anything. John sighed immediately. Is this about Instagram again? His tone wasn't harsh, but I could tell he was already frustrated. That made me hesitate. Not just Instagram, I admitted. It's just the amount of stuff you see. The posts, the art, everything. It's still a lot, and I don't know. It makes me feel weird. Silence. Then, finally, he spoke. I don't get why this is such a big deal to you. It's not real. I'm not cheating. I'm not talking to anyone. It's just something I like. I felt my face heat up. I know you're not cheating. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He sounded genuinely confused, like he couldn't wrap his head around why this was even a conversation. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. The point is that I feel like I'm constantly competing with something I can't even compare to. I get that it's not real, but that doesn't change how it makes me feel. John let out another sigh. I don't know what you want me to do. I already stopped following those girls. I deleted the stuff you asked me to. What more do you want? That's when I realized he didn't see this as a problem, not in the way I did. To him, this wasn't even something worth discussing. And that scared me, because if he didn't think it mattered, how was I supposed to explain why it mattered to me? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I kept going in circles, trying to understand why this situation felt so different to him than it did to me. If John had been watching traditional pornography, videos of real women, I felt like there would be no debate. Most people would understand why that might be an issue in a relationship. Some couples are fine with it, others aren't. But at least it's a conversation people take seriously. So why did this feel different? I turned the thought over in my mind, searching for the answer. Was it because they were animated? Because they weren't real? Did that really make it any less intimate? Any less objectifying? The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. If John had been watching normal porn and I had told him it made me uncomfortable, would he have dismissed me so easily? Or was it only because it was furry content that he felt like it didn't count? I needed to understand how he saw it. So the next day, I asked him, if this were just regular porn, if I told you it made me uncomfortable, would you feel the same way? Or would you take it more seriously? He frowned, clearly caught off guard by the question. I mean, it's not the same thing. But why? I pressed. What makes it so different? He hesitated. I don't know. It just is. It's not like I'm watching real people do anything. It's just art. Fantasy. I felt frustration bubbling up in my chest. But it still affects me the same way. It still makes me feel like I'm not enough. Does that not matter? John sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't see it the way you do. And that was the problem. No matter how much I tried to explain it, no matter how much I bared my insecurities, John just didn't get it. I started questioning myself more than ever. Was I overreacting? Was I making a problem out of nothing? John wasn't cheating. He wasn't flirting with other girls. He wasn't even watching traditional porn. So why couldn't I just let it go? I kept telling myself I needed to be okay with it. That if I just ignored it, the feelings would eventually go away. But they didn't. Instead, they grew, spreading through me like a sickness. Every time I saw him scrolling through his phone, my stomach twisted. My mind automatically assumed the worst. Was he looking at more of those posts? Was he engaging with them, liking them, saving them? I hated what I was becoming. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend. I didn't want to be someone who constantly overanalyzed everything her boyfriend did. But no matter how much I tried to suppress it, the insecurity wouldn't go away. And the worst part was knowing I had no control over it. John didn't think he was doing anything wrong. To him, it was just a hobby, just a personal interest. He wasn't seeing it the way I was, and that meant there was no real solution. I could either accept it and try to force myself to be okay with it, or I could keep fighting a battle that I was never going to win. I wasn't sure which option was worse. One thing was clear, though. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. Either I needed to figure out how to stop feeling this way, or I needed to decide if I could stay in a relationship that made me question myself so much. But I didn't know what the right answer was. And I was starting to wonder if there even was one. I still don't know what to think. Some days, I tell myself I'm being ridiculous, that I'm blowing things out of proportion and letting my insecurities control me. John isn't cheating. He isn't lying. He's just consuming content that, to him, is nothing more than entertainment. Maybe I'm the one making this into something bigger than it is. But then, other days, I feel like my feelings are valid. That if something is hurting me this much, it shouldn't just be dismissed. Relationships are about respect, right? And if I'm constantly feeling uncomfortable, shouldn't that matter? Shouldn't he care about how this affects me, even if he doesn't understand why? I don't know what to do. I've tried to ignore it, but it eats away at me. I've tried to talk about it, but he doesn't see the issue. I've tried to convince myself that it's not a big deal, but it still feels like one. So now I'm here, asking all of you, am I the asshole for feeling this way? Am I being unreasonable for having a problem with something that isn't technically real? Or is this a valid concern, and I have every right to be upset? I don't know anymore. All I know is that I feel like I'm losing my mind.